Melody Time was released in 1948 by Walt Disney Animation and is their 10th animated feature and the 5th film in the package film era, which has come to be known as the wartime era as well. The film, like many of the movies during this era, is an anthology of animated vignettes set to contemporary music. I've been so excited to get around to Melody Time because, believe it or not, I have a lot of nostalgia for this one. When I was a kid, I watched this one back to back with other Disney classics that I owned, such as Pinocchio, Bambi, Alice in Wonderland, The Rescuers, and Tarzan. So already, I feel like I have much more to say about this film over the other package films I've discussed so far, simply due to the fact I have a vivid memory of watching this as a child, and there's a lot of nostalgia built up there. And it made me start to wonder if I would have thought this movie was on par with the other films I've seen in this era if I hadn't seen it as a kid. And the answer is, I don't really know. But I can say that this is by far my favorite of this whole era on rewatch, and I'm actually really excited to talk about it. But before we get into my thoughts, let's do what we always do here and go behind the scenes to see just how this film was made. In 1947, Disney announced that the studio would be releasing a regrouping of various cartoons under the titles Melody Time and Two Fabulous Characters. These films would go on to be released in 1948 and 1949, the latter of which became The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. I'm going to sound like a broken record at this point when I explain a little bit of what this era of Disney actually was for any new viewers, but during and directly after World War II, much of Disney's workforce was drafted into the Army or began making propaganda films for the US government. As such, production was halted on many of Disney's large-scale projects, and thus the package film was born, which were short film compilations that the studio released as feature films that were financially lightweight productions meant to bring in profits to allow the studio to return to feature filmmaking as they had done previously with Snow White through Bambi. The endeavor would eventually be successful when 2 years later Cinderella was finally released and brought Disney back in a big way. A common thread we see in a bunch of these package films are the use of songs and vocalists from the 40s and the use of popular folk music, which sets itself apart from Fantasia, which was put to classical music. Melody Time, like Make My Music Before It, uses popular and folk music from the time to score the film, and some original songs were used for several of the shorts in this film, with the Andrews Sisters singing the 10-minute Little Toot segment, which would be the last film the Andrews Sisters took part in. Melody Time would also be the last feature film to include Donald Duck and Jose Carrasco until 1988 with the release of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Melody Time was originally released in the USA, Brazil, and Argentina in 1948, Australia in 1949, and Mexico and Uruguay in 1950. Interestingly, until 1998, Melody Time remained one of the handful of Disney animated features not yet released in VHS, but had seen a Laserdisc release in 1987. At the time it was released, the film received unfavorable reviews, but the global scope of the film was celebrated. Critics found it to be a solid enough film for children, but it was clear that critics were growing tired of these package films and longed for something closer to the first 5 films the studio released. Later reviews since then have been more mixed, recognizing the film's faults, but praise being pointed to its technical achievements. And it has since then received more love, particularly for certain segments throughout the film. The movie would go on to turn a solid enough profit, making $2.56 million in worldwide rentals by 1951, but it was far from a success for Disney. The movie also has its own share of controversies, one of which altered the film quite a bit during the Pecos Bill segment. In the 1998 VHS release, the film removed all references to him smoking, cutting a huge section of the short out. But thankfully, since then, the scenes have been put back in and are available on Disney Plus and the most recent Blu-ray release of the film in 2021. The legacy of this film also lives on, as many of the shorts from the film were later released as their own original shorts, and if you go to Frontierland in Magic Kingdom today, you'll be able to find many references to Pecos Bill's segment. So, the legacy of this film lives on despite being the underrated Disney film that it really is. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's go into my thoughts on the film. Melody Time is everything that I wish Make My Music was. Both movies use contemporary music set to animation, and many of my problems with Make My Music are just not present in Melody Time. If you remember my Make My Music review, I found parts of that movie really compelling, but found the overall experience pretty dry. Here, it's the exact opposite. I think all the segments are memorable and fun, and there's really not a dry spot for me during the entire film. This could be me just being nostalgic for a lot of these shorts, but I think there's some genuinely great stories here, and there's some of Disney's finest works put to screen, and I'd love to talk about them all. One of my problems with Make My Music was how it really didn't have much in the way of a theme, and was just an amalgamation of shorts that just didn't flow together all that well. And here, I think Melody Time fixes that problem mostly. The film's 7 shorts end up fitting together nicely, despite not all feeling like they belong together. But the music is actually contemporary, and each short doesn't end up feeling the same by the end, which is nice. But enough about comparing the film to Make My Music. What does Melody Time do that makes it stand from the rest of these package films? I think it has to do with how well the music is blended with the animation. This is the closest the Disney company ever got to a second Fantasia besides Fantasia 2000 many years later. The music enhances the images on screen, and you quickly know how you're supposed to feel. Once Upon a Wintertime is this classic love story. It's romantic and cozy. Bumble Boogie is quick, jazzy, and a musical frenzy. The Legend of Johnny Appleseed paints a beautiful picture of the Midwestern United States and provides a captivating story that's lighthearted and adventurous. Little Toot is dark and fun and teaches a nice moral by the end. Trees is just beautiful to watch, and the closest we get to something like Fantasia. Blame It on the Samba is the best use of the 2 of the 3 caballeros, and is just bright, colorful, and weird, and not a feature-length film. And then Pecos Bill is this wonderful moody capper with some great setup that makes it fantastic for a finale. I won't go over every single story in this film in detail, but instead focus on the ones that really stick out to me. And the first one has to be The Legend of Johnny Appleseed, which happens to be my favorite of the entire film. Every time I watch this one, I'm transported back to being a kid and watching this over and over like I used to do. The music is incredible and memorable, but the animation to me is absolutely stunning. Johnny Appleseed is perfect with such lush animation. The backgrounds, and of course the opening and the final shots of the short with the apple blossoms blending into the clouds of the sky. It's a perfect image and is filled with so much hope and beauty. I love the relationship that builds between Johnny and a guardian angel who helps Johnny send him on his way to plant apple trees across the Midwest. The film also ends up being an interesting look into Manifest Destiny, as the pioneers cross over Native American territory, although they appropriate it in a few areas that make it hard to take seriously, such as a party in which the Native Americans are joined with the other pioneers living in harmony. And I understand why Disney has put a warning before this film now. just because of that. But this is just perfect. I love everything about it. This is one of the best things the Disney company has ever done, and that song will never leave my head. The Lord is good to me, and so I thank the Lord. The ending where Johnny Appleseed finally passes away and goes up to heaven to plant apple seeds is an ending that will always stick with me. And that's what I can say about this whole short. It's beautiful, fun, and at the end, extremely heartwarming. Then we have the big finale of the film, Pecos Bill, which follows the famous Texas hero through a retelling told by Roy Rogers, and I just love how this short starts. We don't go straight into the story like all the others. Instead, we have a live action segment with Roy Rogers, Bob Nolan, the Horse Trigger, and the band Sons of the Pioneers, who tell the story to famed Disney child actors Bobby Driscoll and Luana Patton. They combine the live action segment with animated backdrops to make something I find to be very unique, and the mood brought on by the music is great. The use of the song Blue Shadows, sung by the Sons of the Pioneers, is just a perfect way to start this short, and then we are thrust into the story proper with a hilarious and extremely entertaining story and song that blends animation and music together so well. There's great visual gags that really stand out, such as showing a map of the U.S. and Texas taking up maybe 50% of the landmass, or Pecos Bill when he digs the Rio Grande River. The animation is just perfect here. The only thing that weakens Pecos Bill for me is I think it just overstays its welcome. With the short and the live action segment, this goes on for nearly 20 minutes. And Johnny Appleseed was not nearly as long to me, but ended up feeling like half the runtime of Pecos Bill. It's the one thing about this I would say doesn't work. As for the other shorts, I find them to all be variations of really good to just okay. Little Toot ends up being my third favorite with some really good music and a fun little story with a likable lead. The short also ends up getting really dark, especially when Little Toot is sent out to sea after causing a ship to crash into a nearby city. You actually begin feeling sorry for this little tugboat, and having him triumph in the end and be rewarded for saving the day is ultimately satisfying. The other shorts are all pretty solid afterwards, but not nearly as captivating and memorable. Once Upon a Winter Time is one I do always think about, and just really love the animation style with this one. It's different from the rest of the shorts and paints an interesting picture of the 19th century. Bumble Boogie is so short that it's hard to even have much of an opinion on it. It feels like it's done in 2 minutes, and it's definitely the one I think about the least. Then you have Trees, which is beautiful to watch, but I think falls a little flat at the end and is one that doesn't really fit with the energy of the other shorts. But the animation is stunning with the use of pastels and using frosted cells to create the image. It was something that had never been done in animation before, so it's still worth seeing simply because of that. And lastly, we have Blame It on the Samba, which reunites Donald Duck and Jose Carrico, and this feels like what the Three Caballeros should have been. I've already gone over my thoughts on that film, which I'm not a big fan of. It's just an exhausting film that I still find very creative, but it just wasn't for me. I like the idea of it, but I think Blame It on the Samba works where the Three Caballeros failed for me, because it takes all the energy that the film had and puts it into a bite-sized short, which I can handle a whole lot more. It's fun, the music is great, and it does what Saludos Amigos and the Three Caballeros did before it, and blends animation and live action elements together, and I think it looks even better here than it did in those films. Melody Time ends up being just a fun film to watch in the end. It's entertaining and filled with so much energy and life that I feel has been missing from a lot of these package films. There's a lot of care in this, and it has some of the best work the Disney company has ever done. And it's always a nostalgic rush when I revisit this film. It's not perfect, it's nowhere close to the perfection of Fantasia, but it does a great job of showcasing more contemporary music of the time with animation than Make Mine Music did. Segments like Johnny Appleseed and Pecos Bill will always stick with me. I just wish all of the shorts could be as equally perfect and thrilling as those. But as it stands, this is a really solid film and my favorite of the wartime era films so far. So, with all of that said, I'm going to give Melody Time a 7 out of 10. I was so close to giving this film an 8, but shorts like Pecos Bill overstay their welcome a bit, and several of the other shorts are just not as memorable as some of the major ones. But this is still a film worth watching for its music and animation, and I think needs to be looked at more for several of its standout shorts. But with this film out of the way, we only have one more film in the wartime era to look at, that being The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, which I'm excited to rewatch and give my thoughts on. And then we can finally say goodbye to the wartime era for good and move on to Disney's Silver Age. I'm so excited and I can't wait. But as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and stay positive.